America was Second Egypt. Ancient artifacts of Joseph, the son of Jacob, who saved Israel. The Grand Canyon artifacts. Joseph the righteous of the Old Testament, the son of Jacob, of the coat of many colors, who saved the 12 tribes of Israel by feeding them the grain in the time of the famine. Joseph was the second after Pharaoh, a leader of Egypt. And so we continue with the Second Egypt being in the United States, and we see here the sites of Grand Canyon, sites all over the United States, Illinois, Arizona, Ohio, and we found artifacts in these caves, ancient Egyptian artifacts. The ancient Egyptian Grand Canyon, this Egyptian city tunnel, was named Kincaid's Cave for G.E. Kincaid, who first entered the cave when he was working for S.A. Jordan. Visitors were restricted from entering Kincaid's cave after the Grand Canyon National Park Act was finally signed by President Woodrow Wilson in 1919. FBI agents now guard Kincaid's Cave and other archaeological sites in the Grand Canyon. G.E. Kincaid served in the Marine Corps, and after retiring he worked for S.A. Jordan as an archaeologist. S.A. Jordan was sent to the Grand Canyon by the Smithsonian Institute to investigate the information that was reported by John Wesley Powell. The tunnel is presently on cliff wall 395 feet above the present flow of the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon. Archaeologists estimate that the man-made cavern is about 3,000 years old. The man-made cavern is over 500 feet long, has several cross tunnels to large chambers. This was the lowest level and last Egyptian tunnel city they built in the Grand Canyon, and since the time that this Egyptian tunnel city was made, archaeologists estimate the Colorado River has eroded another 300 feet lower. This is the gold artifact that we see here from the Egyptian king named Kian, was found in the Egyptian tunnel city in the Grand Canyon that was named Kincaid's Cave. The Egyptian shrine is holding Egyptian lotus flowers in both hands. Lotus flowers originated as native flowers in Egypt. The Egyptian shrine was the first cross tunnel in the tunnel, which was in the exact same location as the shrines were in the Valley of the Kings. Tunnel cities where Egyptian kings lived before the kings of ancient Egypt began to build pyramids and above-ground cities in Egypt. The archaeological meaning of the power beams radiating to the hieroglyphic symbols of the ancient kings' hieroglyphic symbols means Kian was a powerful king in Egypt. Kian was recorded as a descendant of Zaphnath or Joseph, the Joseph of Jacob, the 12 tribes of Israel, Joseph of the coat of many colors, as we know from the ancient, the Holy Bible, the Old Testament, that was the king of Egypt from 1610 to 1580 BC at Avaris, Egypt, where King Zaphnath ruled Egypt as the second from Pharaoh. All kings and pharaohs had different Egyptian hieroglyphs for symbols identifications. Both the symbol and name of Kian, is on the base of the shrine. The top symbol of the base of the shrine, the left side of the center hieroglyph, is the Hebrew Semitic son of the right hand, meaning the firstborn son. Then in the center of the base is the hieroglyphic symbol for Kian. With his power beams, he's holding the staff of the Lord in one hand. There is no doubt about the identification of Kayan, or that he was descendant of King Zaphna in Egypt, who was Joseph of the Holy Bible. King Kayan sat on the throne of his ancestors King Zaphna at Avaris, Egypt as well. Here we see it. And here we know this. This we've seen in many Egyptian hieroglyphs, and this was found in Kincaid's Tunnel. This was found, of course, as we know, in the Grand Canyon in the United States. Even though the many large other smaller images were found in the tunnel in the Grand Canyon, this artifact was an important discovery for Smithsonian archaeologists. It's the artifact for King Akhenaten and his queen Nefertiti. The king sits on the left, Nefertiti sits on the right. Their ancestors and children's name are on the artifact. The Egyptian name Zoroaster or Joseph is one of their ancestors. It's recorded that Akhenaten restored the Semitic religion of Ammon, they believed in one god, that is, in Egypt and Saqqara, Egypt. Akhenaten was the recorded ruler in Egypt from 1353 to 1336 BC. His son Seteprin was also an Egyptian ruler in the Grand Canyon and was recorded as the king at Saqqara, Egypt as well. And this is something magnificent. Pharaoh, Nefertiti, and artifacts. This Egyptian information means that the Egyptian kings came to the Grand Canyon at various times, but also made return trips to Egypt. Now, these gold artifacts from the Kincaid Tunnel are the only artifacts on display in the Smithsonian Institute, Washington, D.C. They are from the Grand Canyon, from Kincaid's Tunnel. The back two artifacts, the big statues, are King Akhenaten and next to him Queen Nefertiti. Yes, from the Grand Canyon. And this as well, the artifact from Kincaid's Tunnel in the Grand Canyon. It looks like a sitting Buddha. This artifact again was found in the Egyptian Tunnel City in the Grand Canyon, identified as an artifact for King Aperanat, who sat at Saqqara, Egypt as well. In Egypt, King Aperanat was known as the powerful king that ruled foreigners as well. This copper statue. Well, we've seen this many a time in Egypt. This copper statue in Kincaid's Tunnel, Grand Canyon, was identified. So, the copper statue in Kincaid's Tunnel reminds us of the animal-headed statues of Egypt. This is the statue found in Kincaid's Tunnel in the Grand Canyon, identified as a shrine for Anubis. This is Anubis of Egypt, also found this particular statue in the Kincaid Tunnel in the Grand Canyon. The shrine and statue of Anubis. It's impossible that he was ever in the Grand Canyon. Anubis was a famous Egyptian embalmer that believed in an afterlife. And also the Grand Canyon filled with pyramids. This pyramid temple was named the Zoroaster Temple. Zoroaster, of course, being Joseph of the coat of many colors. The original Seth Tanner Trail is still a popular tourist trail in the Grand Canyon. And the Egyptians who mined copper, silver, and gold from the Grand Canyon. Silver, we know, is a very preferred metal still being used by the American Indians. There are many ruins of Egyptian metal smelters and furnaces in the Grand Canyon, and these metal smelters and furnaces are located in the second plateau of the Grand Canyon, and there are several mining tunnels and Egyptian tunnel cities in the cliff walls of the second level Grand Canyon plateau. Now this is a huge pyramid, even though the Iris Temple, this one here, in the Grand Canyon is now badly eroded. A few of the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs can still be seen on the cliff walls. Many think that the great flood, the deluge, happened after all these were constructed. The temple also has obvious entrance, but only a few feet into the temple the entrance is closed, and the National Park Services will not allow excavations of the pyramid temples. A small gold artifact found again in Kincaid's tunnel. This artifact for Iris is currently on display in the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., one of the few artifacts from the Burroughs Cave in Grand Canyon and Kincaid's tunnel found in the Grand Canyon. The Egyptian legend for Iris, the goddess of power and love. She was the first daughter of Gad, who was the first god of earth in Egypt, and her heart was full of love. The hearts of her love are on the base of the image of her. The gold artifact from Kincaid's tunnel for the Amunet, the secret one, another artifact for Amunet is the secret one, and Gad was found in Burroughs Cave in Illinois. The Egyptian legend for Amunet is the secret one was the only goddess of Egypt. Gad got her pregnant and she jumped high and hid in the heavens, it says. The Amunet laid a big egg that shined like gold. This was the first sunlight in Egypt. The egg was big because there was a twin boy and girl in it, and the Amunet saw that she had wings and flew from heaven to Egypt, and then everybody in Egypt knew who Amunet was, and Amunet was no longer Amunet, the secret one, because they all knew of her. Now, the Egyptians built some large entertainment centers in the Grand Canyon. The buildings had wood roofs. They're no longer there, of course. They've been eroded away. They've rotted away. The buildings had wood roofs. These entertainment centers had large fields for foot races and games, and had shower rooms, homes, and for different athletes' teams. The centers also had large theaters for musical concerts and kitchens to be prepared for meals and for Egyptian kings, athletes, and musicians. Now this we know. The mummies and the crypt of the mummies. The tunnel complex that Mr. Kincaid found was a burial chamber. The mummies were placed in the burial chamber walls on large stone blocks, as we see here, in rows. The Egyptians began coming to the Grand Canyon according to the carbon dating of the mummy bones, and the carbon dating for the oldest mummies was about 1600 BC. Now this is also interesting. Prime Minister Nubar Pasha of Egypt, the first Prime Minister of modern-day Egypt, and served his first term from January 1884 to June 1888, this Prime Minister, Nubar Pasha of Egypt, contacted the U.S. Department of State requesting that all of the Egyptian artifacts found in the Grand Canyon be immediately returned to Egypt. He also requested that no more information about Egyptians ever being in the Grand Canyon be published by the Smithsonian. Now, what right he had to ask about that, who knows? Now, going on to the remainder, we have John Wesley Powell talking to a native of Jacob, Vermont, Grand Canyon. This picture was taken in 1869. The native knew that he was Egyptian, European and Hopi Indian descent. John Wesley Powell lived in the town of Green River in Emery County, Utah. A member of the Powell expedition was accidentally killed, and John Wesley Powell hired Jacob Vernon Hamblin to replace him. 1869, John Wesley Powell worked as an explorer and archaeologist for the U.S. Department of the Interior, came down to Green River to explore the Grand Canyon. And John Wesley Powell was the first person to report any archaeological information to the U.S. government about the natives that inhabited Grand Canyon and their histories. And Powell served as the second director of the U.S. Geological Survey Department, 1881 to 1894, a division of the U.S. Department of the Interior. John Wesley Powell was also director of the Bureau of Ethnology at the Smithsonian Institute and supported linguistic and sociological research at Smithsonian Institution publications of discoveries and research information. Now, Powell River History Museum, located in Green River, Utah. John Wesley Powell had previously reported the pyramids in Wisconsin and all along the Mississippi River to the U.S. Department of the Interior. John Wesley Powell River History Museum has all of his information on his discoveries, including the bones of a dinosaur that he discovered that has been erected in the museum. Pictures of entrances in Powell Caves in the Grand Canyon. And Powell wrote that he said, we explored the cave, found shrines, this shrine, and other artifacts. And it says that evening I sent a team member to notify the Smithsonian Institute of our discovery. We continued to survey the canyon and discover more Egyptian tunnel cities. I estimate in my report that I think that upwards of 50,000 Egyptians had inhabited the Grand Canyon at one time. The shrine in Powell's Cave identified a shrine of Setet Perin, sometimes spelled Shmek-Ker or Seti. Now this is the map of the Nile Delta River in Egypt. King Seteperi was the king Akhenaten's son that began his first rule of Saqqara Shemu in 1336 BC, but only lasted 10 years, which was when he died on his last trip from the Grand Canyon to Saqqara, Egypt. King Setepren recorded bringing this may be the reason that his shrine was not ever covered with a hammered gold sheet of thin gold, but the shrine was likely built by his Buddhist followers. And we found also Egyptian urns found in Powell's Cave in the Grand Canyon are now on display again in the Smithsonian Institute, Washington, D.C. Isn't that something? Egyptian urns in Grand Canyon and Egyptian hieroglyphs in the Grand Canyon. Smithsonian archaeologists who were exploring Powell's tunnel in the Grand Canyon in this diagram from Egypt. Egyptian writing system in the Egyptian came when the ancient Egyptians came to the Grand Canyon. It was a school tablet used for teaching Egyptian children to read and write. The animal and bird symbols were used to describe the rank of the kings on the Egyptian hieroglyphs carved on the cliff walls of the Grand Canyon. It's interesting to note the rectangular box on the top second row from the left is a Hebrew Ark of the Covenant symbols. And then the lower, the same row in the box without a bottom, which was the Hebrew sun of the right hand symbol. And now we also have, of course, the Hopi Indians, cliff dwellers. When the Egyptians came to the Grand Canyon around 1700 BC, they began building tunnel cities in the Vermilion cliff walls in the north rim of the Grand Canyon. The cliff dwellers, the Egyptians first selected overhangs that had balconies so the kings could walk the edge of the plateau balconies and look down at the farming and mining that was located at the lower levels of the Grand Canyon. The Egyptian kings had their Egyptian hieroglyph symbols and hieroglyph symbols in the canyon walls around the tunnel cities and the cliff walls. Egyptian kings and their on the cliff walls, their hieroglyphs. The Kiabab Plateau here is about 8,000 feet above the present flow of the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon. These cliff walls were the top cliff walls that were above the large Kiabab Plateau of the Grand Canyon. All of the Egyptian temples are on the north side of the Grand Canyon as well. These are the Walhalla ruins. These ruins in the Kiabab Plateau of the Grand Canyon are being excavated now. Because of the plundering of artifacts, even the Smithsonian archaeologists, FBI agents attend excavating teams in the Grand Canyon and now at all sites in the United States. And here we have the Hopi Indians. Grand Canyon National Park was named an official national park in 1919. The National Park Service has a policy preserving the history of Native American Indians when establishing parks. They lived on the North Kiabab rim of the Grand Canyon, the cliff dwellers, where the Egyptian pyramids were located. And they knew the name of the Hopi Indians have a god named Tawa. He has a man's face that smiles all of the time and has a good heart. The Hopi Indians still use a large number of original Egyptian words in their language. And we know that they have a beautiful song, a beautiful hymn that they sing, Yaha Naha, meaning that's the Yaha, the meaning Yahweh. The short for Yahweh is Yah. Yaha Naha means I wish I had Yahweh. The Hopi Indians still use a large number of original Egyptian words in their language, and Aramaic, of course. Seth Tanner, a Mormon who lived in the Grand Canyon with the Hopi Indians, was the translator to the National Park Service researchers for the Hopi Indians, and he had 2 Hopi Indian wives. He said the Hopi Indians were Mormon Christians that called themselves a people of one heart. He was their pastor, who was also a farmer. Now, this is the Tower of Set. Actually, the Setraprint Pyramid was named by the Hopi Indians. The Tower of Set was to be built in the Grand Canyon, was a burial tomb for King Setaprine that came to the Grand Canyon, but King Setaprine died on a trip back to Shemau. Now, this is the Zoroaster temple that we said before in the Grand Canyon, was named by the Hopi Indians. All of the Egyptian hieroglyphs have eroded off pyramids. The Set pyramid has rectangular shape similar to the first pyramids in Egypt. And we know the Egyptian legend of Zoroaster was Egyptian when times were hard for Egypt, became the poor nation, meaning the great famine of Egypt. Zoroaster's first name had been Joseph because he had a god that was higher in the heavens than their sun god named Ra, that knew what the dream meant. Joseph knew how to interpret dreams, that is. He built a big boat that had wings, sails, and that would carry many people, and found more grain and gold for the Egyptians. When he came back to Egypt in his boat loaded with gold grain, the Pharaoh made him the ruler of Egypt and remained Joseph to King Zoroaster, and Pharaoh was like a father to King Zoroaster. This is a very fascinating pyramid. It's the Smithsonian archaeologists think that this is an unfinished pyramid, an unfinished Egyptian pyramid in the Grand Canyon, a burial tomb because there is an entrance tunnel that is blocked a few feet inside the pyramid. But the National Park Service will not allow archaeologists to excavate any of the pyramids in the Grand Canyon. And one of the crypts was opened in the Grand Canyon to see if there were mummies in them before they were sent to the Smithsonian Institute storage building, such as this one. I'll leave links below for you for this on ancient Egyptian America. Take a look at this closer pyramid with the yellow lines. In the background you see a rectangular huge pyramid. This is of course the Grand Canyon. These were found in the Grand Canyon tombs, and this is the Cahokia Mound Pyramid in Illinois. So there is a lot to be found in excavated ancient archaeology of America, and a very strong connection to ancient Egypt. And of course, ancient